are live. We're just gonna let some people roll in. Hi everybody. We're just a tiny bit behind today, but I see all of you guys tuning in, and that is wonderful. So my name is Dia Dynasty. I am one half of La Maison de Rouge, and this is our weekly Periscope, and we're coming to you from my basement. And today we have Goddess Anesthesia. Hello. And this is my cat lady, who will probably just sit here on my lap. Yeah, so I just wanted to let you know that there will be lots of comments and things, and don't let them distract you. Okay. Hopefully all of you guys are now well trained to hold your questions until later. We will have a Q&A section at the end of the interview. Hello, Trash Can Tom. So that you can ask questions, and Goddess Anesthesia will be more than happy to answer them if they're polite. Hello Leather by Danny. And then, you know, if you guys don't have questions, that's okay, but just please hold them until the very end, because we're going to be having a conversation about Goddess Anesthesia's kink journey into kink, as well as speaking a little bit about some of the healing modalities that she brings into her BDSM practice. So first of all, let's have you introduce yourself with your titles and your I guess how long you've been titling, as well as your pronouns.
Okay. I market myself as Goddess Anesthesia. I enjoy being referred to as goddess or mistress or ma'am. Sometimes daddy or sir. In my personal life, I fluctuate my pronouns. I feel very fluid about gender, and that's a big part of what has informed my life as a person evolving through kink and fetish and consensual violence and psychosexuality. I really enjoy she pronouns, and often when I hear the word she, imagine a capitalized S. So for me, that's how I think of the she, and I'm often feeling the channel of that energy and what that means in a really personal way to me in my practices, my work, my sex life, my identity. And that's a really fluid pronoun to me, but holds a lot of personal power and symbolism. So I like that one too.
Yeah, it sounds like you really take a lot into each, I guess, or the whole spectrum of gender, informing like your thoughts and your feelings and how you present yourself and show up for yourself in this world.
I would agree.
Yeah.
And I really like to think of the body and energies coming through to embody the body in flux, and I like to think of the fluidity even of the parts and assignments and social infrastructures that are governing a lot about how we interact with one another pretty much in every sense.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about that too. And I guess before we get more into your backstory and your history, maybe we can talk about gender just a little bit in how you I guess play with gender, and how you I guess, how do you is it like a thing that you feel day to day, depending on just your own feelings, how you feel like presenting?
I do play a lot with presentation. I think at different times, because of my own socialization and how things are, that will have a different implication on how I experience my parts, like my breasts or my, genitals and what they really feel like. And sometimes that makes me want to dress a certain way or act a certain way. And I know that that's largely informed by the ways that we're socialized.
Okay.
I feel a really strong embodiment with a phallus. So a lot of my sex play engages with a hallucination or a psychic experience of having a cock, and also a really deep internal cauldron of the inside of my body that feels like a cunt. I feel really fluid between those things. I feel that I derive different sense of power from those experiences and my sexual experiences. And I also think that I enjoy indicating that that's an experience I feel that all bodies have a potential to work through.
Yeah, I think that it's really, it's not as profound these days, because people are more and more coming in tune with the idea that gender can be fluid, and that maybe if you get more in touch with yourself and have an embodied experience with your own sexuality and your own gender, that you're not 100% masculine or feminine all the time.
Right. And what those things have even come to mean.
Right.
And what they mean in different cultures. I don't pretend to know everything about the world, but there's different aspects of power and social power and
sexual power.
Yeah,
that I think our culture prescribes to men and women, but if you really looked inside yourself and kind of feel yourself, I guess it's those prescriptions that are that can be actually kind of damaging, because they create a mold that of expectation that so many people are actually harmed by.
I believe that as well.
Cool. So let's talk about the evolution of your own sexuality, like maybe from the very first time that you became aware of being a sexual being.
Okay. I remember being terrified at the prospect of playing Spin the Bottle, or people, asking me out the football notes in middle school. I don't know if that's generationally relevant to any of you or to you.
Yes.
And in my early experiences, mostly felt my deepest sense of inspiration and arousal from connecting about music or metaphysical topics or philosophy. My first middle school boyfriend and I used to listen to like classic rock albums on the phone, and we'd start them at the same time and fall asleep and whatnot.
That's really cute.
But it really felt complicated for me to think about like even holding hands or making out, and I like physically felt very dysphoric from very early on, yet knew that I had a sexual appetite. It just felt really outside of what my peers were doing.
So, do you mind if I ask you, you're talking about high school, like how did you, or middle school, high school, how did you present and identify, if at all?
Sure. I don't think there was ever a point that I ever identified as a heterosexual. Different things about different people and their bodies or gestures, and mostly their psychic energy, would feel arousing to me, but I didn't necessarily know how that would translate to a relationship or to touch. And a lot of the fantasies that I had would be about strangling someone or stuffing food in their mouths or you know, us making each other blush, or, you know, so this was a lot of, and it just didn't really resonate.
That would be my next question, was like your relationship to kink, but
sure,
you know, we can dip in and out of that, because it sounds like you were pretty in touch with your kinky desires from a pretty early age,
sure,
without maybe necessarily having that
vocabulary.
Language. Yeah.
And I think, you know, in terms of gender, I think that sometimes I would feel like a boy with the boys, and I would want to, you know, wrestle with them, or get into, like, I would get off on, like, mischief, like smashing mailboxes, or, you know, riding in the car and, you know, being the girl with the boys, but deeply feeling like a boy. And then at other times being fetishized as a femme and being othered by them.
Oh, right.
And then among my girlfriends, having, you know, almost like a, I think that I felt a lot of sort of prismatic experiences with my girlfriends too, and also different. And when they would get ready or get dressed or be doing their makeup, I felt really strange about why I looked the way that I looked, or felt the way that I did, or had a different experience of my body when we were talking about sex. And at different times would shave my head or grow it out, or, you know, experiment with presentation. But until I really came into having the vocabulary that I think is still evolving around the gender spectrum, I definitely just a lot of times felt weird, and sometimes felt magical, and sometimes felt cool.
Yeah.
You know, and despite having the vocabulary now, I think I still find myself in that spectrum. Yeah.
So would you, I don't think that you would use this word in your introduction, but a queer, like like queer is maybe the most all-encompassing word for, and I mean, I identify as queer too, even though for the most part, like, how I present is female and heterosexual.
Sure.
You know, I have a hetero male partner, and I definitely pass as, you know, normal in a lot of instances, but I definitely don't feel that way on the inside.
Sure.
So I can definitely relate to that kind of, you were talking about like a sense of dysmorphia.
Yeah, well, yeah, I guess I feel different at different times.
Yeah.
And definitely before I had an idea that gender was on a spectrum or something that was in flux, I remember staring at myself in the mirror and taking a lot of psychedelic drugs as like a teenager, and just looking at myself or hearing my voice or thinking about my body or being with other bodies, and just not knowing how to correspond in the ways that I felt like I was being projected onto.
Right.
I always got attention for being attractive from different people, but it's always been confusing to kind of get the body together. So embracing the terminology around queerness has been great for me in a lot of ways, because it allows me to feel a grayer area around my own gender, and also my own desire for a spectrum of genders and body types, which I think are all really different topics, like gender, anatomy, presentation, even femme and masc. I think that a lot of times people can have a very gray or opaque experience. For instance, I feel very non-binary, but often present as a femme, and maybe that's a way that you're relating, you know, passing as a cis person and having a femme identity, but having a different experience with your body or your social roles or your desires. All of that feels so innumerably complicated and vast. So I think queer encompasses that.
Do you, okay, and this is slightly off topic, so I'm sorry that a lot of my interviews are very sprawling and kind of all over the place, but do you feel like, and I'm asking you because of things that I know about you that maybe our audience doesn't, but I know that you're somewhat spiritual and into metaphysics. So do you feel like maybe past lives have a lot to do with the culmination of all these different feelings and perspectives about yourself and your body in this lifetime?
That's a very interesting and evocative question for me, and I think about it a lot. One, in terms of the cellular ancestry of my actual you know, my bloodline and my mother line. And I think about the choices that my grandmother or my mother made around their sexualities. As far as I can tell, they're both deceased. So I think about that, and that genetic coding that comes, and what kind of pain or misogyny that they lived through, or what sort of relationship struggles, or, you know, the way that they were evolving as women in their times, how that impacted me being born and assigned in my gender and raised by those people and in that familial structure. And I do think of that in a way as a past life sort of thing, the cellular imprint, the DNA. And then I guess, you know, there's a part of me, I'm a hypnotherapist in my vanilla practice, which still doesn't feel super vanilla. There's a lot of people that have extremely vivid experiences of having been other humans.
Yes.
Though in my own regression work, I feel I often regress back to having an experience of being elemental, like light specifically.
Okay, so non-human.
So I think, I mean, as strange as that sounds, like my own past life regressions, I end up elemental. And that just might be the way that metaphor functions in my brain, and that might have something to do with the different species that are among us. But I think about a lot of that, and aside from having a lot of questions and curiosities, I'm not sure I have a firm statement about.
Sure, yeah, I mean, because it's hard to know.
Totally. But all the coding and imprinting and shape-shifting of cells over the time are inevitably informing our interface.
Absolutely. And that's why I think that maybe we're not really meant to know all these things, or to have like concrete answers, and to embrace like the entire spectrum of all the possibilities within us, you know? So like in the current time that we live in, like there's like it's almost like everything exists, and all possibilities are here. And so that's why it's so wonderful to have a language and a vocabulary to speak about it now, because there hasn't always been that.
Sure.
So as far as maybe your you touched upon this when you were talking about your more formative years, but like as far as your sexuality goes, what are some of your interests as a personally and also professionally?
I think a lot of it blends together. There are definitely, at different times, I've sort of isolated or reserved different parts of myself for what I would call my personal or professional life, or my kink life versus what I feel like I'm doing with partners. Okay. That's something that's evolved so much for me, and I'm in a place right now that feels really open to connecting, to consent, to uncovering what's real and authentic, not crossing the lines that don't need to be crossed, engaging in the ones that need to.
Okay.
Like just you know, interpersonally, I think having sex or connecting with a lot of people in the queer spectrum that have very specific experiences of their body that may or may not be in sync with the way that their assigned gender has been socialized, and, you know, sort of keeping things within limits. I guess my interests are in discovery and in finding what people are keeping as secrets and what I keep as my own secrets. I think
that's where all the juicy stuff is.
Yeah, totally. I think that's why I like to work with hypnosis, because it gets people talking and connecting with things that maybe they feel shy or oppressed about.
Sure, that's one of the things that I really relate to you on, is that hypnosis is like a way of conversing that's a whole different language than what we're used to.
Sure.
And sorry, like got a lot of cat hair on my face. And it's very subtle. It's not like, okay, I'm going to hypnotize you now. Sometimes it's more just like a slight change in the cadence and the tone of your voice that brings somebody into a hypnotic state. And it's not like, you know, we're trying to make them, you know, squawk like a hen or anything.
Well, sometimes.
Yeah, well, you know, like if that's what they ask
Time
for.
and a place.
Yes. But but you know, we're not trying to like pull one over on them. You know,
Right.
it really is about getting deeper.
Exactly.
And that is actually very therapeutic and cathartic for a lot of people.
Yeah. I think it helps. I like to push boundaries. I
do
like
too.
to push boundaries with myself and other people, and I like to create a space that's extremely safe, but also made to expand at the right time. I like to push boundaries, but not in a way where I'm, you know, violating boundaries,
Right.
but more kind of, you know, when you're, for instance, doing a massage and you get into a knot and then,
Oh, yeah.
you know, 20 minutes later you smooth out the knot. And so I think when I think about boundary pushing, it's sort of similar,
Yeah.
like with pain thresholds
Yeah.
or people's fear, you know, creating the chamber of intimacy where someone can dissolve
Yes.
the
Yeah.
limits feels really powerful.
Yeah, but you want to find the knot.
Exactly.
Yeah, totally.
And from the person's own arrival at that and
Yeah.
in that time, as much as it may seem that I'm pushing as a dominant, I feel like I'm more facilitating someone else's release into
Yeah.
what that is. Yeah.
And yeah, I think that in it of itself is like the essence of healing, you know, like kind of holding that space for the person
Sure.
to allow themselves to heal themselves.
Yeah.
That's
So
really
that's
awesome.
what it is. I really couldn't emphasize that more around the notion of healing. People are arriving and doing so much work within themselves that I feel very seriously about not being a person that's doing that to someone else. You know?
Yeah. I think there is this misconception about healing a lot of times that, you know, we're like sorcerers or some magicians, and we're waving our wands around and lighting candles and, you know, dusting them with powder and whatever, and it's all just like this mystical experience that the other person has no part of. But in reality, like, it's a collaboration.
Yeah.
It's a collaborative effort. Yeah.
And people come with the legacy of their entire life, and when someone chooses to let that go to open to a different narrative, it's really
very
powerful
yeah.
and brave.
Yeah, it's very brave. And that's why it's so rewarding to be on this side of it too.
Totally.
So you kind of described your relationship to kink more or less. I think that it's a part of your queerness as well.
Sure, a part of my queerness, a part of my curiosity, a part of my creativity. Yeah.
It's a part of you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel that same way. Like, I don't know that I could live a life devoid of kink or separate kink out from my life. You know, it's like, it's kind of a balance sometimes. No voices. I don't know, dude. We're talking with our voices. So how did you get into professional BDSM?
It's not something that I really necessarily envisioned for myself until one day I realized that nothing else really made sense. Does that make sense?
Yes. Because you tried maybe a few other things and you're like, that's not it.
And also tried, you know, over the years, I really can't stress enough, despite my deep inner knowing about my kinks and my queerness, there are so many years that I have spent beating my head against the wall, conforming to relationship formats, to people's sexual projections. And so I think that I'm still in a process of undoing that. I can't say that that's something that will ever end in terms of socialization. And
it's deep.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm on that. I mean, I feel like most of the people I know are on that path, including a lot of people in their like 60s and 70s too.
Yeah.
Because right now is that time where so many things are being pulled out of the woodwork and out of the closet, and having the light shed on them, and if we weren't going through that right now, we would never really know what's in the shadows.
Right.
And there's just a lot in the shadows.
It feels like and I can't verify where this comes from, but it feels so important to be undoing in this time. And to me, that's, I guess, you know, I know I didn't come here to breed children.
No.
But I did come here to sort of to undo creation.
Yeah. To kind of create a new world.
Yeah.
I feel that way too, and I don't know that it's necessarily like purely intuitive. I think it's like cosmic as well, you know?
Totally.
It's like I can't say that we're officially in the age of Aquarius because there isn't like a defined demarcation of like Pisces into Aquarius. But Aquarius is the symbol is the maiden with the water bearer. Like she's pouring water out of a huge vessel, and water is like basically the flow of information, and so that's basically represented with the internet, and and then that has not just the internet, but just like the exchange of information and how we've all kind of started unfolding more and undoing and dismantling and unfolding.
Possibly, this is really tangential, but I think about that ESP that we're approaching with the internet. You know, it almost induces this sense of psychic information to see everything on social media, and then we have these gestalt ways of connecting things and sort of knowing where we all are. And yet this is perhaps, you know, this technology is the most ancient human occurrence. You know, the Egyptians knew about it. And so I almost feel like the replication alienates us from that sense of connection while trying to create it in a capitalist format or a technology or something.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely moving in that direction.
But it's achieving the same thing, or... Yeah,
it's, I guess in some ways, like, I see it depicted as the snake eating its own tail.
Yeah.
Which, you know, we've come full circle in a way with all this information.
Sure.
And we're at that crux where, you know, a lot of ancient civilizations fell because they abused their power with, you know, all the information that they were given. And are we going to be that again? Are we going to keep repeating that history? Or are we going to actually, like, take it to where we can all, you know, live in harmony? Because that's not what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
Okay, back to some tangible ideas. So pro BDSM was something that you, like, when you found it, you were like, oh.
Well, my friends had I've always been around people in the sex industry. I've always been around extremely kinky people. I think I felt very outside of it for some reason. And I think, you know, because I haven't always had a femme presentation, and I don't still, like, for instance, I wear wigs. I dress really differently. In my brain, despite what I know, which is beyond, you know, gender being a socialized, like, marketable thing, it was always like, oh, I'm not a pretty enough girl to market this thing, you know, or it just never really occurred to me that it would be a career path. And it became naturally a career path. I started just experiencing transactionality around some kink.
That's nice.
And then I got into phone sex and sort of explored more psychological relationships. Because I think of money as power, and
it is.
It is.
I mean, it's like it's a energetic currency.
Yeah, an energetic currency.
Yeah.
Totally. So I think that some things started developing in that way for me, and when I just realized, or had a flashback from the kids in middle school, you know, telling the rumors to the other kids that I was a dominatrix, you know, they were calling me that from the time I was like 13.
Before you even really knew what that was, right?
It was all of a sudden, like, my life caught up to me.
Yeah.
And I was like,
yeah,
like
yeah.
And,
that's,
you know,
so funny.
It's
that
a strange... To you too?
Yeah.
It's funny. It's like they were like, she's a witch, you know. But I had a mentor, a colleague and a mentor because of the way that I saw her. Years ago, that told me the best thing to do in life was to be exactly who you are and make them come to you.
Yes.
And that there's this myth around the work that we have to do. And for years, I think I was dissociating, stressing out, trying to establish some career path that was just, you know, the microaggressions in a coffee shop felt so much more stressful to me than the direct consensual violence that I'm dealing with now.
Yeah.
And the misogyny that I was contending with, just, it feels so different than to be like, I know what this is.
Yeah.
This is the transaction. This is the consequence, you know? So I guess it kind of tumbled into itself that way. And I still find myself arriving at, it's almost like just arriving at what's easy for me. And that becoming like another kind of undoing.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, because I think it's really easy to get caught up in the visual culture. And you'd mentioned Gestalt, and it's kind of like that is one of the ways that we navigate, you know, visually around what draws us in and what, you know, repels us. And so a lot of times a lot of these kind of visual cues are what we're allowing to inform us. But then when we're so caught up in that, a lot of times we forget like what's inside being the more powerful thing, and the thing that, you know, that we need to radiate instead of like the other way around.
Yeah.
And I definitely relate to that too. Like something I said to somebody the other day, like really hit home. I used to let other people define me. And it may not seem that way to a lot of my friends and people that have known me, but surprisingly, like I really did let other things outside of me define me because I wanted to belong. And then I realized, I'm already here. Like I already am a part of this world. Like whatever belonging that I'm seeking is an illusion. Like I'm already, part of the human race.
Yeah.
So that definitely kind of turned things around. It was just like, well, what do I have to give?
Yeah.
You know, what's unique about me? And that's helped me to shape a lot more things in line with who I am.
Thank you so much for saying exactly that. I relate really deeply to that, and I think BDSM and kink has been a real way to harness my own centerpiece. It was especially, perhaps you relate to also shape-shifting.
Yeah,
absolutely. Channeling.
Yeah.
And I feel like as people, as individuals, as beings that have that really naturally, it's so easy to just become the projection of someone else.
Totally.
And I really think that we're dealing with that on so many levels. Like the cultural gaslighting is out of control.
It is. In a lot of ways it's like, but you do have to balance how you monetize your projection.
Exactly. Yeah.
With who you really are, and I think that's when the compartments kind of can be useful in some ways.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like the same way that, the tarot utilizes an archetype, or that we just work with archetypes anyway. I think that the channel is a femdom and presenting a certain image, and then using that image to really crack open the misconceptions of what the gender norms or the power dynamics might be in the heteropatriarchy is really powerful, because you're like, here I am.
Right. Come a little closer. Yeah. Tell them Large Marge sent you.
Yeah. So that feels like a powerful thing to channel, like, for all of what femme or woman or goddess or whatever these archetypes are that hold power to anyone that feels the line of that systemic violence,
Yeah, totally. And I think that there are definitely people out there who, potentially are clients, who feel kind of like a sense of that there is an imbalance, and maybe how can they help?
Like have a reparation,
like
a relationship to reparation.
Totally. Yeah, and that's always welcome.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that all of you guys can hear us. Somebody was having issues hearing, And I would assume that if anybody else was having trouble hearing us, they would say something as well. So I know that ManPeach is logged on. ManPeach, can you hear us? Me. Yes, we can. Okay, good. Very good. Okay. So speaking of, the balance of power and reparations, what are some of your special skills that you've acquired other than hypnosis, or maybe hypnosis as well, to kind of bring in healing modalities to your BDSM practice?
It's an interesting question. I feel like any skill in the realm of physical play that has to do with sensory thresholds is super useful, because I think pushing into pain and working with release and calming down the nervous system is powerful. So I'm grateful for the things that I've picked up along the way there. I think a lot of what I'm doing feels really more intuitive than what I do in a hands-on way. I've always had more of an emphasis in the psychology of my sessions, and mostly sort of probing or role-playing dynamics that seem to speak to a really early, unrecognized conditioning. Really listening to people when I do negotiations or intakes.
Reading between the lines.
Yeah, reading between the lines, like asking a lot of questions, seeing what comes up.
So just a reminder to please hold your questions until the end of the interview, like all the other interviews that we've done. Thank you. Because we want to get to your questions. So anything specific, like you said that it was more intuitive.
Right.
So, I mean, I would imagine that you probably bring in a little bit of hypnosis into your play.
Sure. Some people specifically, I feel, seek out that as the major, the word be caveat of our session work. I think I bring a lot in with gender. I feel like I do a lot of gender play with people. That has always been natural to me.
Yeah.
Feminization feels very specific. I don't know if I approach like sissy play the same way that a lot of people do, or I haven't seen a lot of people in their own session work, but
yeah, that's always kind of unknown what other people do.
Yeah.
I do know that there are DOMs out there that that use like forced feminization or sissy play in a way that is contrary to what the expected gender role of becoming sissified usually is. You know, it's like it's humiliating to be a sissy or to be forced femmed, but it's actually for these other players and these other DOMs, it's like it's an honor.
Yeah,
and
I think of it often that way.
Yeah,
or can be, depending on how I feel like I'm being approached to enter that kind of relationship.
Yeah, I think that's a really I think it's a really profound way to play with gender, and also and this is slightly different, but like, you know, kind of giving cis males an idea of what it's really like to be a female, just like walking down the street, and to be a woman that's like momentarily, like each moment of the day, you know, you're having to do kind of a psychic defense all over the place.
Totally.
You know, like
constant objectification,
right, and
catcalls.
Yeah, and you have to sometimes be aware of who's walking behind you, who's walking beside you, maybe even cross the street sometimes if you don't feel safe. Like, I don't know that cis men necessarily have that awareness of their environment, and so like that kind of impending threat is something that that is also played with in sissification or
Absolutely.
or forced feminization.
Yeah,
I think that's you know, kind of a continuous thing that we have to keep bringing up,
keep up and keep in dialogue. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Is there anything about I guess healing through BDSM that you want to like keep growing in your life, or is this just kind of?
Sure. I think what I've been thinking about most recently, because I've been shifting my style of doing negotiations, especially around psychological edge play, and some of the ways that I think about relationships in my personal life that have evolved or entered. I think that one of the most powerfully healing things available in BDSM play, DS relationships, has to do with the agreements that we make and the ways that we kind of check in on the day-to-day. I feel really grateful for having gone to one of Midori's bondage workshops recently, like maybe 6 months ago, and I got to see her negotiation before a bondage demo, or it wasn't quite a demo, she did a scene with someone she's been playing with, but I was weeping the whole time just thinking about how incredible it is to have people that agree on a power dynamic and agree on what they're willing to extend to one another, talk about what they want to feel, and having been subject to so much non-consensual violence in my life, the difference between abuse that I think a lot of abuse survivors end up, you know, living with and seeking in relationships, and really healing power play has to do with the agreement and the terms of the consequences based on the agreement. So when I think about all these structures and potentials and negotiations in pushing boundaries and dissecting our psychologies around what's happening, I realize the implicit caretaking in this play. Yeah. Thinking like, for instance, I could think for years, because of the way that I think I grew up being punished, it was hard for me to feel loved unless someone criticized me.
Oh, wow.
So I think that when I think about this in other relationships, when it comes to humiliation or accountability with my submissives, a lot of times there's an understanding of someone feeling as though they're being cared for if something's at stake and there's a consequence, or they might be punished, or they might be humiliated if they do something bad. So I think in all of these models, we're seeking to deconstruct care. Yeah. And so...
And care can look so many different ways. Yeah. To so many different people.
And for so many different reasons. Yeah. So the negotiation process and dissecting what these models of care are in these relationships that deal with consensual violence or consensual power play, or just consensual extreme physical experimentation, or, you know, curiosity, which to me is
self-discovery. Yeah.
I think that for me, it's really seated in this negotiation process and the way that I've evolved in my practice and how that negotiation skill has transcended into vanilla relationships, work relationships. Yes. It's just it feels really revolutionary.
It does, and it's just like being able to just open up this dialogue and keep it open. Yeah. A lot of times is like, I don't know, it changes the entire game, because nothing is done in the dark, nothing is done in the shadows, and nothing is underhanded or and so that just it just lays everything on the table so that everybody can see what's really going on.
Yeah, and introduces even introducing the concept of mutual consent is so powerful. It's not something that's implicit in hetero rape culture.
Oh, you know? Right.
So that is mind-blowing to me. Or that someone doesn't have to feel embarrassed to say, I want to spend this kind of time with you and my expectations look like this. Are you able to meet them? Yeah. You know? Yeah. And for that to be possible, when I think about boundaries or just what we can be doing socially, projecting the best case scenario by having a clear shared intention is really mind-blowing to me. So that's kind of where I'm at with.
It's so funny because like humans have been given the skill of language for so long, and we just haven't been able to always use it effectively.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot of reasons for that too. You know, our sexualities are repressed, we're silenced, we're abused, depending on our genders, our racial backgrounds, and our classes.
And our cultures.
Cultures, we don't always feel permission to even
or even have it modeled,
want something, or be honest about something that we're feeling. So I feel like unlocking that permission in relationships that's really what I'm about.
Yeah,
here.
yeah,
So,
that's awesome. And that is a basic principle of BDSM is negotiation and consent, and kind of the idea that consent is ongoing and reversible and can be revoked at any time. And so it's like you do have to keep this open dialogue, and you do have to keep having these conversations, because as soon as you consent to something, it may open up other doors of consent as well.
Exactly. And to not, and to, it's in my entire life evolving deeper levels of honesty and a deeper capacity to make requests of others, or to understand the requests of others, like learning about accountability and boundaries. I don't know if I would have a legitimate framework for any of those topics if it weren't for this practice. And when I just think about everything on a socio-political level, I wish everyone would just visit their local dom and learn something about communicating.
They're vetted local dom with
sure.
with experience, and not the ones that just exist on the internet. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Sorry, every time my cat comes on and I'm like, so do you have any advice for people who are looking to BDSM to kind of help them get over some sort of trauma, maybe paired with therapy as well? Like we know that even though BDSM and pro-domination can be very therapeutic, it in and of itself is not therapy. Right. So that's the kind of distinction that I wanted to make sure that everybody knew, and that bringing BDSM into the path of healing can be very helpful. Do you have any? Sorry.
Sure. And I think also sometimes can really not be. I work with people that are full-blown addicts to spending money and abuse, and it feels really complicated sometimes when you're making money doing a one-off, and it's not always therapy. I want to just also be clear that it's also an industry in the patriarchy, and I am marketing femininity, and men are getting off on, it doesn't always get to be as deep as I'd like it to be.
Oh yeah, I think that is kind of their own responsibility to get through that cycle or that that loop, because it just kind of like keeps it's kind of just like the same thing over and over again for them, which is why therapy is so integral to the healing process, so that you have a way to kind of work yourself out of that loop mentally first.
I feel like BDSM can be a way to activate or visualize certain models. I just read this incredible, I listened to it as a book on tape, called The Body Keeps the Score.
Oh yeah, I have that. It's kind of a thick book, and I've been, it's on my reading queue.
I highly recommend Book on Tape.
Yes.
It's very intense, but I feel like it's one of the most groundbreaking things that I could imagine having. I really hope that I continue to reread it and listen to it and have dialogue about it. But in the second part of the text, the author depicts a lot of different models of sort of externalizing traumas. Like, okay, so you're in this therapy, but now you're going to get in a group and you have a memory of a situation that you lived through, and you're placing a person in the group as the role of your father, an object in the room as the mother, and you sort of can externalize it, and you have a different sense of control because you're not reliving it, but you're bringing a different sense of your inner resource in the present tense to reframe. And so I think when BDSM is used to reframe, it can be really powerful. And I think when working with other kinds of professionals that have access to describing that kind of reframe that are kink friendly, that sounds amazing.
Do you know of anybody that or a resource that somebody could connect to find these kind of players?
Well, I guess the person that I know here is Dr. Pitagora, Alex.
Okay, yeah. Kink doctor.
Kink doctor.
Yes.
Yeah. And as far as I know, and I've checked it out, they have an index of practitioners that are kink friendly. And
that would be Manhattan Alternative. .com.
Yeah. So I've read through a lot of those profiles. They seem like really interesting people.
Mm-hmm.
So I imagine that kind of therapy, depending on what you're looking to work out with a dom that is really thinking about what we're thinking about, could be a great, companion to one another, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Sometimes, like, I've actually been referred, like, I've had some of the healthcare practitioners from that website refer clients to me. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I'm, like, not really sure if I'm doing a good job because I don't know what exactly they're looking for. Like, they give me their history, and I'm kind of like, okay, do you want a very immersive experience, or and maybe I'm not asking the right questions. So I think that's something that I need to be able to differentiate, is like, when they're coming to me from a therapist, are they looking for something immersive or more like casual?
Right.
Because I think that
like
can
to go through motions, or to really enact a dynamic that's super intimate. And because different people have different needs when they come and see a pro dom. Okay, well, is there anything that you would like to tell our viewers, just in general, about who you are, or what you believe in, or how BDSM has kind of like impacted your life? It's always hard to say something about who I am, because I feel like that's in flux. Mm-hmm. But perhaps the exploration that I find in BDSM and the prism spectrum of queerness, and the vocabulary and experience that I continue to unpack in alternative expressions of gender and alternative sexual practices, it's such a politically and spiritually deconstructing paradigm. Mm-hmm. And so I think I can really get behind that paradigm in my own experience, because it feels like it releases me from a lot that I could never be, and that I will never be. I'm all about that.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it brings out your most authentic self in a continuously thoughtful way, where you're just
the evolving self, pushing the boundaries, seeing other people's boundaries, not stagnating, not thinking of sex as one thing, not thinking of a certain kind of relationship as the penultimate relationship, deconstructing the hierarchies, queering families, getting different kinds of care and different expressions from different kinds of people. I think that for me, a lot of the normative models are extremely toxic and flawed. And I think that alternative sex practices have really helped me deconstruct, and I continue to heal through that. I don't think it's an easy path, because there aren't tons of models or examples of people that are defying those models, but I find so much relief in the kink and BDSM communities, and at times queer communities. Despite the way I feel troubled by identity politics, I also feel really embraced and healed by the fact that we have that language. But the more I talk to elders and peers in the community about the ways that they live and play and have relationships and form bonds and rely on one another and grow, I'm just so relieved that I don't have to be something other than what I am, and that I can reconfigure that all the time. Yeah,
it's really great that there isn't one system or one pathway within BDSM, and even though there's basic pillars and principles like consent and like negotiation and even aftercare, we still are able to move in a very fluid way within all of these tenets of BDSM. So I do find that very very liberating too, and I think like for me, somebody who grew up without a lot of modeling for me, I guess I've had like this open road, and for me it's been hard to choose like where do I go, and letting other people kind of define me in that way, like you come this way, and I'm like okay,
Right.
gives me a lot of ideas as to different ways of doing things, but then I eventually have to come back to myself and be like, well, are these what I want, you know?
Yeah, and even knowing authentic desire and want based on contrived, projected, having an actual format for discovering that is just really relieving to me. So, you know, everyone can obviously pick the things that they need to evolve in their lives, but I feel really at home the more I evolve in my BDSM practices. So
That's awesome.
yeah.
Yay! Hopefully you guys will also find your own way in how to do the things you love to do without hurting anybody non-consensually. And then, so if you have any announcements as far as projects that you're working on or travels or anything like that, we can talk about those while we also open up for questions. I know that somebody had asked a question about nipple play. So if you wanted to bring your question back about nipple play, we would be more than happy to answer that. Otherwise, Goddess Anesthesia will just... can you describe the most exhilarating scene you've ever experienced recently, and what enabled this?
The most exhilarating scene and what enabled this. I just got back from New Orleans, and I got to have 2 very exhilarating scenes there before I came back. And I think one of them was a fisting session, a fist punching session.
Fist punching?
It was, punching.
Whoa.
And I got to do it with my best friend, who was one of my, you know, she's younger than me, but I feel like she's gave me a lot of support when I was making the transition as a professional. So something that is extremely exhilarating for me is doing doubles.
Oh, yeah, that's really fun.
Yeah, so I think that was wonderful. And also, this person covered the entire hotel room with, like, black trash bags, and it really looked like a murder scene. And it was, like, a very nice hotel suite. And I was with my best friend and traveling, and, you know, it was just great. Because we got to, obviously, expand in the session, too, and I think just because of the extreme and getting to do that someone I care about and feeding off of that's just really exhilarating for me. And it's hot for me too to be with another femme and to really objectify a body together. Like, it's an experience we're having, and he's just almost not even there.
Yeah, and you get to riff off of each other and bond that way as well. Yeah.
And I also, you know, as much as he's not there, he also is. And I really enjoy like the way that relationship is objectified when that's consensual.
Yeah.
So that was really fun. And I also had a very long sort of minimalist session with someone that had never had a feminization session before. And I shaved his legs in the bathtub for about an hour and just like got all the hair off, and we just kind of sat and talked and really connected, and I could just tell that his like heart was pounding, and he was having this whole new experience that I feel fully confident that this person will continue to shave their legs. But that was nice too, because I really like slow pace with that kind of intimacy, and it just, in a way I felt like siblings, in a way I know that he felt really humiliated, and I liked that it had this impact. It's someone that has a very masculine job, and you know, like I liked knowing that there was going to be this connection to the session for, you know, possibly weeks after. Just,
right, because, of the way that
the
hair...
way.
Yeah.
So
but it's his own little secret. Yeah, totally. So, I mean, it's really surprising how something really simple can be so intimate and resonate in like so long after.
Yeah.
Because it's different, like if you're shaving your own legs than if somebody else is shaving your legs. If you guys have more questions, we'll stay on a few more minutes. But did you have any announcements?
You know, I just got back from traveling, and I was in Miami and Fort Lauderdale and West Palm Beach and New Orleans for the last month and a half.
Wow.
But I wish I could have told you all about that before I left, even though I got to play with some really fun people. I just got back to New York, so I am accepting session requests again here.
Okay.
I'll be pretty solidly here at least through mid-April, and I'll be traveling south probably through Philadelphia and DC sometime in April. So I travel a lot.
So how do we find you? And then I have one more question. And
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
I have a website, thegoddessanesthesia.com.
How do we spell that?
TheGoddessanesthesia.com. And that's anesthesia, you know, like for surgery.
Right.
Like
the stuff that numbs you.
Wordplay. Hypnosis.
Okay, so Kick and Butt says, I want to be dominated so bad. My wife is not at all into it, thinks I'm weird. What should I do?
This is like, I think, a really good question, because obviously a lot of people do not feel as though it would be safe or reasonable for them to be out to their wives or family members. And I feel like this is something that in the industry, I'm sure you think about and deal with too, you know?
Yeah, I think that Kick and Butt, like, you might want to respect your wife's, I guess, boundary of not being into dominating you, and you could talk to her about it. Like, you can tell her your own desires of why maybe it fulfills some sort of emotional need, maybe it gives you a break from, you know, your everyday man box, whatever it is that you know, that
sometimes
you...
I think exposing the vulnerability of why that desire is there,
right,
can be really helpful.
Totally. And just, you know, having a conversation about it isn't necessarily the impetus to do anything on her part or to even feel pressured, but it does give her maybe a better understanding and kind of like demystifies like the weird of whatever it is that she thinks you are wanting to submit is. But if she doesn't want to dominate you, then maybe, you know, it's time to look for a professional. I don't know what kind of relationship you and your wife have, if this would be necessarily a consensual thing, because I do know that some married couples, you know, like they like to preserve the sanctity of their dynamic by not playing that way,
right? Because
it can taint the rest of your relationship.
Sure. I mean, shifting a power dynamic when you're relying on certain roles and power dynamics. And I think in a lot of normative relationships, especially when people have families, you know, children or whatnot, maybe there isn't even that much space to go really deep psychologically or sexually.
Right.
But that's one of the reasons. I mean, a lot of times I know that I'm working secretively and in discreet relationships, and I feel ethically intact about that because I just believe that people deserve outlets.
Yeah.
And you can seek a dominant and have boundaries around whether or not it's good to leave marks on you, or you know, ways, you know, you can set up something that still protects the major boundaries of the relationship.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm really not a fan of people keeping secrets, but I also just realized that sometimes it's actually not an option to be fully transparent. This is something I really like in my own life. Feel unwilling to keep secrets. But realize
it's unfortunate that sometimes, you know, a secret is, or maybe it's not necessarily a secret. It's more just an agreement to not talk about something. You know? And that kind of like takes away the pressure of it being like, oh, I can't talk about it. It's more just like the other person doesn't want to hear about it.
Yeah, and you know, honestly, our private ideations and ideas are, we can really never know what's going on in the mind of another person. So I think sometimes we ought to really give ourselves opportunities to explore what some of that is outside of.
Yeah.
But that is a complicated one in the whole industry for me.
Yeah. Hopefully, kicking butt. I have given up, but those are good ideas. Oh, you're welcome. Okay. So he says, thanks for hope. And then Leather by Danny says, do you two consider life coaching a healing form of domination?
A healing form of domination.
Yeah, actually I do.
Yeah.
And like life coaching, I guess, is something more specific to something that isn't kink based. But I do know, so for example, Lucy, my partner, she is, she's enrolled in a life coaching course that's going to span like many months. And she's bringing life coaching as a tool into her domination. So I think that it absolutely is a form of domination. And it can be very healing in that it helps you to focus on not so much your victimized past and your traumas, but like what's in the future.
Sure.
You know, like how to move on from that.
Sure.
And I think that whenever you do have a clear path in front of you, that is very healing. You have those positive words. You're not focused on like, you know, the pain and the suffering and the coping. You're focused on
what you want.
Yeah, what you want. And being able to name those things.
I wonder though, I don't know much about like the format of life coaching, but I'm not sure that's so much domination as it is organizing suggestions.
I think
like maybe like a Venn diagram of.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely the Vesica Pisces inside of that, where you can spin it as domination because there's commands.
Yeah.
You know, like you need to journal and that is a
like that the accountability, the assignments and the accountability.
Right.
Totally.
Yeah, I have a few slaves that you know, like not everything that we do is kinky. Some of what we do is, I guess, on a more life coachy slant, where it's like meditation and journaling and being accountable for like your consumption of what you're eating every day and things like that. Or how much
you're jerking off.
Right.
Yeah. I you know, in shifting into a more professional landscape, I have definitely found that I'm surprised by the number of people that seek exactly that. Mm-hmm. You know, and that the gender dynamic holds a space for that. Like it encourages a certain kind of accountability.
Yeah.
But it's often, I mean, well, it's, you know, there's definitely a fraction of relationships I feel that I have with submissives or slaves that don't have a lot of direct lines of, you know, what people might consider sexual at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like you said, Leather by Danny, like you met your goal, here's your chastity key. That's exactly one form of reward is like, you met your, you know, like you met your weight goal, you lost weight, and you're at this ideal weight, so you get to have some freedom. I think that's absolutely one of the ways that you could spin it into healing female domination. So if there's no more questions, then we're going to say goodbye. Thank you so much.
Thank you so
much for
this
conversation.
I appreciate it a lot.
And for making it here. And thank you guys for being so polite. And attentive, and for tuning in. And next week, I'll be back with another guest, but probably not my cat. So, yes, I will send your best to Lucy. So I'll see you guys next week. My name's Dia Dynasty, Goddess Anesthesia. All right, goodbye.